When we learn, we 1. Acquire facts, 2. Fit them together into knowledge, and 3. Understand how to use that knowledge. An excellent technique to help you achieve all 3 goals is spaced repetition. Welcome to the Field Guide to Study. Memory and learning are linked. You can't have one without the other. When you first learn information, like in a lecture, it's stored in your working memory, but it doesn't last long. Typically, most of what you first learn goes within 72 hours. That's why when you're in a lecture, it often makes sense at the time. It seems like you remember it, but a few days later, nothing. Long before your end of semester exams, there's only a few scraps of knowledge left. If you map this out, it looks like this. This was called the forgetting curve when it was established experimentally by Hermann Ebbinghaus over a century ago. So, knowing this, how can you escape the forgetting curve and retain as much knowledge as possible? You have one goal: intercept the curve while you still remember some of the content. Think of it like resetting your forgetting. You learn something, the curve goes down. You revise, resetting the curve, but the curve strikes again. It's not a bad thing though, because this time you'll forget slower. This represents more knowledge being encoded in your long-term memory where it truly sticks. Time for another interception. Revise the content, encoding more into your long-term memory, making that knowledge more robust than when you first learned it. Forgetting begins again, even more slowly. Intercept, revise, encode. Eventually, most of the knowledge becomes part of your long-term memory. Knowledge you can then apply in problem solving that you can link with other knowledge you acquire in the future. This is the path to long-term memorization and robust understanding. As you progress to long-term memory, the spacing between revisions gets longer and your understanding of the content becomes deeper. Facts become knowledge. The revision is spaced over time. The revision involves repetition. It's spaced repetition. A fundamental of study is that it works best when it's split up over time. That's why many students find spaced repetition so powerful. For spaced repetition to work, you need to think about 2 things. 1, how to schedule it, and 2, what to do. First question. When do you need to start intercepting the forgetting curve, i.e. your first spaced repetition? In my experience as a learning advisor, I found it's best for students to revisit their lecture notes 1 or 2 days after they've taken them. The simplest activity here is to reread your lecture notes, then 2 to 4 days after that, revisit the notes again. You've doubled the time interval. That's the fundamental of spaced repetition. You'll find the content is building in your long-term memory, you forget it more slowly. If you want, you could continue this kind of spaced repetition, doubling again. Look at your notes 4 to 8 days later, and so on. This is a structured and basic example of spaced repetition, but you probably want to be more than basic. You want to get maximum yield for your effort, so don't just stick with rereading lecture notes. There's an incredible range of activities you can use in spaced repeats to maximize the learning process. So you want more than rote memorization. Strive for deep learning, and it's surprisingly straightforward to do. For example, for the first repetition, try transforming your notes into a mind map. In the second repetition, try writing summaries of the most important concepts. In the third repetition, think like your lecturer. Think up some challenging questions about the content. Predict what the exam would look like. Write it yourself. Can you answer the questions effectively? This gives you a feel for what you learned and how quickly you're forgetting it. And ask yourself, do you need another repetition? What are some study techniques you can do that are different from last time? Ultimately, you can do whatever works best for you in these repeats. Trial and error will give you some insight into what works best for you depending on what you're studying and the situation. Ultimately, how you time your spaced repetitions is up to you. Some students find it useful to have a regimented timetable and they know exactly when they are dedicating time to specific content. This works really well if you're deadline focused. Other students take a less structured approach. They study over time using repetition, but do it in an ad hoc way, revisiting content as they see fit. Both approaches work. You will need to decide what works for you. Either way, the goal is to distribute study over time rather than squeeze it all in at the last minute. Spaced repetition is a way to turn learning into a habit. It takes facts you're learning and provides a framework to fit them into concepts, and then enables you to apply these concepts to problem solving, i.e. to exams. Anyone can look up facts on Google, but building deeper knowledge for problem solving requires those facts to be in your head. It's the only way you can truly understand the relationships between individual facts. So remember, knowledge is power. Do you want to enter your next exam feeling confident? It might be time for you to give spaced repetition a try.